friends. So now let us learn something about the living world which is occupying our earth. So we have seen that we have varieties in this living world which is occupying our earth, right? So in this chapter we will be studying about those varieties and how these varieties are interrelated to each other, and how can we group these variety of organisms into some grouping system, so that it will be very easy for us and for our scientists to do some research on those organisms and to study the phylogeny or their evolutionary relationships within the group or among the group itself. So the first chapter of our 11th standard, that is the living world. Okay, so when I say the living world, what do I mean by living? Or when can I say an object to be a living or a non-living? Yes, there are certain criterias depending on which, or keeping in mind which, I can be classifying my organism into a living category or into a non-living category, right? So let us learn something about the criterias on behalf of which I'm going to classify the organism into a living or a non-living. Okay, so when I say the living means, some or the other factors comes to your mind, right? Okay, so first study what is living. Okay, now our earth, we have seen our earth, they have diversity in their climate, they have diversity in their organisms they are occupying, and we have diversity in the landscape also, right? We have many different regions or which is present in a single earth. Depending upon these regions, we have different types of organisms also present or residing in that regions, right? So here we will be studying about those organisms, the organisms which are related, or they some organisms which are showing some common relationships or some common characteristics. Will be grouping those organisms into one group or into one category depending upon the similarities or dissimilarities they share between them. And also we will be studying about how to classify the organisms into different groups, and how are we going to name those organisms, because we need a scientific name, or we need a name for an organism by which it will be known all over the world, but not by its vernacular name or by its local name. Yes, we have different regions and we have different names depending upon that region or locality. So for the scientists or for the researchers to study about those organisms, we need a common name given to that organisms by which it will be known all over the world, right? And also we'll be learning about the taxonomical hierarchy. This taxonomical hierarchy is nothing but it is the steps or the criteria on which we will be classifying the organisms into different ranks or into different categories, right? And also at last we'll be studying about the taxonomical aids which will be helping us to classify the organisms and to learn the characteristics of those organisms, right? So starting up with the what is living. Okay, so when I say living, the organism or the object to be a living or to show a living characteristics, what do they need? First, they should show growth. Yes, the organism should grow in size, or it can grow in numbers, right? So the growth can be of two types. It can be in the size growth, or it can be the growth of numbers. And I can relate this growth with reproduction also, right? When I say the growth in numbers means the organism is increasing in numbers, which means the organism is reproducing itself or increasing its population, right? So growth, it can be in the size growth, or can be increase in the number. Usually my unicellular organisms, what they do, they increase in numbers rather than growing into size, right? And our multicellular animals, they usually grow in size. So this is usually shown by the multicellular organisms, and these are my Unicellular organisms. So in unicellular organisms, I can relate my growth with reproduction, right? Yes. Okay. Now, again, in growth, there are some exceptions. Now, when I say growth, also my growth shows some exceptions. Okay. I say when organisms are said to be living, when they are showing a property called as growth, or when they grow in size or when they grow in number. Okay. But we have some non-living things also which grow in size, like your mountain, your sand hills. They also grow in size because of the deposition of the soil or because of the deposition of the sand, right? So this is also growing in size. But can I say this is also this can be a growth of the non-living organism? No. But why? Because the position from the outside of the body, right? The growth of the organism should be from the within of the body. That's only when I can say the organism to be living, right? So my growth should be from within the body. Okay, so this is being my first criteria, growth. Okay, also within, if the growth is from the body or within the body, it is usually by the division of the cell. Supposing in a multicellular organism, how the growth in size will happen? This is usually by the division of the muscle cells, right? This will divide and this will accumulate to give a growth in that organism. But in a non-living thing, as I said, mountain or sand hills, it is basically deposition of the sand or the soil on the mountains, right, or on the sand hills. So this is how the difference lies between the growth of living and the growth of non-living. Okay, so taking growth as a factor, I can't say my organism or my object to be living. I should have some other supportive criteria also to relate this growth or to relate the organisms to keep it in a living or a non-living group, right? So coming to the second criteria, which is reproduction. Yes. So as I said, my reproduction or my growth can be related with the reproduction in a unicellular organisms because these are growing in size, these are growing in numbers. In turn, they are reproducing within itself and giving out the increase in the population, or thus giving out the same species. So reproduction basically can be related with the increase in the growth of the unicellular organisms. In multicellular organisms also, reproduction is the very first or the very important factor to classify the organisms as a living organism or to say the object to be living. Why? Because reproduction, basically we are talking about the sexual reproduction. Even asexual reproduction is considered as a reproductive factors. But by sexual reproduction, how they do? They reproduce sexually to give out the same species which can again reproduce within themselves, right? So reproduction being the second criteria to which I can say an object to be living. Now coming to the third criteria, which is metabolism. Yes. Now what do I mean by metabolism? Okay, I have an object. It can be unicellular, it can be multicellular. If an object is a unicellular organism, whole cellular activities will be occurring in a single cell itself, right? If it's a multicellular organism, when I say multicellular, it is made up of different types of cells, okay? And these different types of cells will be forming different organs which will be functioning the whole body of an organism, okay? So these different types of organs which is present in an organism, they are performing different kind of functions to keep the organism live, and these functions are coordinated by some means, maybe your brain, maybe by hormones, okay? So this metabolism is nothing but whatever the nutrition or the whatever food the organism consumes, it is metabolized within the body to release some kind of energy, right? And so this metabolism happens where? These metabolism happens in each and every cell to release what? The ultimate product, which is the energy which is required by the organisms to work for its activities, right? So my metabolism, it is made up of two words again, which is catabolism and anabolism. Okay, what is catabolism? Catabolism is breaking down a complex compound into a simpler compounds. Okay, so this is breaking complex compounds to simple compounds. And anabolism is forming a complex compound from a simple compound, or by joining the simpler compounds to form a huge big complex compound. So it is forming a complex compounds or compound from simpler ones. Okay, so let us I'll give an example for catabolism and anabolism. Catabolism is when I'm breaking carbohydrate into simpler compounds to release energy, and the simpler compounds for my carbohydrate is nothing but it's glucose, right? So I have a complex compound as carbohydrate, and I'm going to break these carbohydrate into simpler one, which is my glucose, or the end product is glucose. Anabolism is I'm going to join these simpler compounds and to form a one complex compound. For example, I'm going to join amino acids to form a protein. So these amino acids are nothing but these are my simpler ones or simpler compounds. On joining them, what I'm getting is a complex compound, which is my protein, right? So I'll write an example also here. My catabolism, breaking carbohydrates into glucose, right? And my anabolism, many amino acids to form protein. So protein being my complex compound, right? So metabolism is nothing but it is the catabolism and anabolism, in which some substances are getting catabolized to release the smaller, simpler compounds, and some substances are getting anabolized to give me a complex compound, which is, and this depends upon the requirement of a cell or the body, right? So basically my metabolism is nothing but how the cell or the body, a unicellular organisms, cell in the unicellular organisms and the multicellular organisms, the body utilizes the chemicals which is eaten through nutrition, which is given through nutrition to the body, how they are going to utilize those chemicals or those compounds to give a product which is required by the cell or by the body, right? So that is metabolism. So a living organism must show metabolism to continue its life, or to give a life, or to give a body all the requirements which is needed for its living. Now coming to the third criteria, which is cell organization. Okay, now from the very starting itself, I am saying unicellular and multicellular, right? So this unicellularity of a cell or the multicellular organisms, they show some kind of similarities or differences in the cell structure, cell organization of the cell, right? When I say unicellular organisms, their cell structure or their cell organization will be different with my compared to my multicellular organisms, right? Because my unicellular organisms or the single cell has to perform all the activities for the life of the cell, right? And in multicellular organisms, I have many different kinds of cells which is forming different organs and which is regulating or which is controlling the body, right? So the cell organization also plays a major role for the living criteria. This cell, as I said, cell, and we have already studied about the cell We know about the cell. We have a cell wall in plant cell. In animal cells we do not have cell wall. So, and we have a plasma membrane. In between we have cytoplasm, which is provided by all kind of cellular organelles, right? And these cellular organelles are performing different functions for functioning of the proper complete cell. So organization of these cellular organelles within a cytoplasm of a cell is a very crucial or a very important part when I say a cell to be a living, because these arrangement of these organelles and the structure of these organelles is what going to perform the metabolism, is what going to perform the reproduction, was going to perform the growth of the organism. These are the properties of the cell, or these are the area within a cell which is forming the compounds which is required by the cell, or which is giving out the compounds from the cell outside, which is considered as a waste for the cell, right? So my cellular organization again plays a very important role for the object to be said as or to be classified as a living. Now coming to the fifth criteria, which is consciousness. Now when I say consciousness, means my body should be very alert or very conscious to some or the other kind of external stimuli which is received by the body, right? So, or it should be able to sense the environmental factors. So it is called as consciousness. Now again, whether this consciousness is usually seen in the animals only, not in the plants, right? So this consciousness again have some exceptions, in which I can say that the man which is in coma, okay, even though they have all the body is living, but they are not conscious, or their brain is not conscious to act or to receive the stimuli which is given out by the environment or the atmosphere, right? So at that time the body is living, but the system of the organ system or the systems in the body is operated by what? These are operated by machines. And the man is in coma, so they do not have any conscious, they are not in a conscious state to respond or to receive any external stimuli, right? So that is again, this is again the criteria for the organism to be a living. Now coming to the sixth criteria, which is responding to stimuli. Yes. Now, as I said, consciousness is the organism is very conscious, or they know what is happening around their what is happening in their surrounding. Responding to stimuli is whatever external stimuli which is given to a body, my body should respond against it, right? And this external stimuli can be in any factors like external shocks or any other kind of external stimulus which is given to the body, and the body cell receptors, they receive these stimuli, and it is sending these stimuli in the form of signals to the brain, and then my brain responds how to react against that stimuli which my body has received. Okay, so this is also this also happens in plants as well as in animals. In animals, for example, when I say I'm pricking a pin to any man, okay, what it will suddenly respond to that pricking, right? So it will pull out his hand. So that is how my animals respond to the stimuli. And for plants, this stimulus is responded by plants in the form of their change in the shape, in the form of their movement. For example, phototropism, the plant moves in the direction of sunlight, so that is how it is responding to the external stimuli of the sun. Hydrotropism, my plant's root, they are moving towards the water if it's an aquatic plant. Geotropism, if it's an terrestrial plant, my plant roots will move towards the earth and not towards the above the soil surface, right? So that is how my parts of a plant or plants respond to these external stimulus. Okay, so this also becomes a very important factor for the organism to be living. Once it responds to stimuli, it gives some reaction against any kind of atmospheric or environmental stimuli which is given to the body. Okay, so these are some of the criterias, or clubbing these criterias. If an organism shows all these factors, I can classify an organism to be a living and not to be a non-living. So not only any one of the factor, but it should be appropriate with all these 6 kind of factors. So what is living? Let us quickly revise it. When an organism, it shows all these 6 kind of criterias into the cell or into the body. It should show growth. It can be in the size growth, it can be in the increase in number, and the growth should be from within the body, right? And it should show reproduction, that is, it should be able to reproduce to form or increase the population of its own species, and these species again can reproduce among themselves to further increase the populations, right? The body should show metabolism, whether it's a unicellular organism or it's a multicellular organism. It should show metabolism for its continuity of the life or for the activities of the body, and to release energy which they are going to utilize to work out some kind of activities. Then the cell organization, how the cell is organized. If it's a unicellular organism, all the factors for a cell to be living should be present in the cell itself, and the cell organelles which are present in the cell, it should be organized in such a way that it should have a proper communication among within themselves, and should be able to form the compounds which are required by the cells, and should be able to eliminate the compounds of waste, which is now called as waste, from the body, from the cell, so that it will not accumulate in the cell and will be toxic for my cells. Okay, this is the case same with the multicellular organisms. Though unicellular organisms have a single cell, so they are having all the machineries in a one cell only. Multicellular organisms, these are made up of different types of cells to form different types of organs. So I have different type of organs which is performing this functions in the multicellular organisms. Now the organism should be conscious to know, or it should be conscious to the activities which is happening around its in its surroundings. So that is called as conscious, or that is the factor which is conscious and usually seen in the animals only and not in the plants. Then coming to the last criteria, which is responding to stimuli. So my organism or the object should respond to the external stimuli, and this external stimuli can be in any form. So when my external factors, it gives out some stimuli to the cell, my cell should be able to receive these stimulus and should react against that stimulus. So in multicellular organisms, this is basically in animals, preferring to animals, these are basically received by the cell receptor, and the signals, this stimulus signals are given to the brain. Then my brain decides what action has to be taken against that stimuli. And plants also, my plants also show some kind of stimulus to the environmental factors, as we can see a very easy example of the movement of plant towards the sun. So this is how my plants also show stimulus towards the external or the external stimuli, according to the, or by changing its shape, by changing its movement. So this is how my plants also show stimulus. So these are the 6 criteria on which an object should be positive, should be on, so that they can be classified as a living organism.